Today's episode of the Kansas Dynasty is going to be a little bit different. Of course, last year in Season 1, we introduced ourselves to the prospects on our recruiting board throughout the season, going through high school highlights of a few players at a time throughout the duration of the season. But in an effort to make Season 2 go by quicker, I think it makes more sense to talk about all of these guys in one episode. So today will be our recruiting special for season number 2, where we're going to highlight pretty much everybody on the recruiting board, talk about their skill sets, talk about where they are recruiting-wise. And coming off a national championship appearance last year, our grades are pretty high. So because of that, I feel like this might be the most important year of recruiting in the series because of the amount of good players who are interested in the program. Coming into the week, we've got a lot of guys narrowing their lists down. That's kind of the story of where we are recruiting-wise, including one player, Alexander Finger, who is all the way down to 3 schools and probably will be committing next week. This episode is going to be fairly similar to the recruiting specials I did on my dynasties back on NCAA 14 all those years ago, for those of you who remember those series. For the many of you who did not watch those series, buckle up, because we've got a lot to go over today. And of course, as we look back at last year's class, there were nowhere near as many highly ranked players who were interested in our program, but a lot of guys who have already contributed as freshmen. Clyde Poole, of course, started in our win against Missouri, showed some good flashes. He also is our leading rusher through the first 2 games. We've seen a little bit out of Jazeer Tolbert. He scored in the win against Missouri. Devontae Crispin had an interception in that game. Seth Jennings had a sack that was taken away off of the penalty. And we've got many other guys who likely will make impacts for us in the future. But I think this recruiting class, or at least this crop of players, gives us guys who not only will be good players down the line, but a lot of guys who I think would start for us as freshmen. Now, obviously, we're not going to get all 35 of these guys. I think if we get around half of them, it would be a win. So before we get started, I do want to go over some slight changes I'll be making to the board. We're going to put some guys on and off, and that starts with Alexander Finger, a prospect who I really like at the safety position, which is kind of a need for us. We just had him visit last week, and Kentucky's still in the lead. I think it's a lost cause. I think he's going to commit to Kentucky this week. We're going to take him off the list, and we're also going to remove running back Tracy Willie. He's a good player, but we already have 3 other running backs on the board in less competitive battles, and I don't think Tracy Willie is that much better than any of them. So we're going to take him off, and the 2 players we'll be adding are offensive tackle Kenyon Denbo. He has some interest in us. If we can put ourselves in the top 8, that I think will be alive and well in that battle. And then safety J.P. Hussein. Doesn't have any scholarships right now, so he's a guy whose battle I think we can sneak into and look to get. Kenyon Denbo is a gem. We're off to a good start. We're definitely going to offer him a scholarship. And then J.P. Hussein as well. Looks pretty solid. I think he's going to be more of a free safety. His coverage ratings for being a fringe top 1,000 prospect honestly look quite good. So we're going to give him a scholarship as well. We're going to go position by position here, and I want to dissect the players we already have on the roster while going through said spots, and that includes the quarterback position, which I think is the most fascinating storyline on the recruiting board, because I'm not convinced we have our long-term starting quarterback on the roster, and I think any of these 3 guys could be that. Now we've got some intriguing long-term upside here. Isaiah Marshall, I think, could be a good player. Clyde Poole looked really good in the win against Missouri, and DeAndre Rainbolt has started development. So there's a chance our long-term quarterback is on the roster, but I think all 3 of these guys have more upside and very well could be the face of our program going forward. But the question is, which one? In terms of ranking, Enrique Rambo is by far the highest of the group. He's the 3rd-ranked quarterback in the country, the number 14-ranked player nationally, but there's not that much interest in him for whatever reason. Rambo is from Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Fayetteville High School. Notable NFL alums here include quarterback Brandon Allen along with Dre Greenlaw. And it's easy to see the talent with him. 6'4", 211, impressive arm talent. He can make all the throws, dynamic as a runner as well. Now, I don't think he's that much better than the other 2 guys we have on the board, which is why we're not heavily pursuing him. And right now, it looks like a 3-horse race. You've got the hometown school, Arkansas, but they signed a 5-star quarterback last year with Malik Page, who I think is going to be really good. So to be honest, I would argue Ole Miss is the best fit of the group, and I think the Rebels are really going to amp up their recruitment on him over the coming weeks. But again, the biggest reason why we're not going after Rambo that hard is I think these two 4-stars are just as good. That starts with Sean Pollard from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Booker T. Washington High School. Notable NFL alums here include Dax Hill and Tyler Lockett. We have his 3 motivations figured out, so we're going to be able to hard sell this week. And I really like the talent with this kid. I think this guy's got a chance to be a long-term starter for us or wherever he ends up going, and a future NFL player as well. The arm talent is just as good as Enrique Rambo. The accuracy, the athleticism on the ground, again, just as good. And it certainly doesn't hurt that he's a gem either. Now, there's a lot of schools interested. Ironically, Arkansas is in second place. They really want to make sure they have a good quarterback long term, and I guess it's hard to blame them. And then we get to Kerry Chosen from Littleton, Colorado, and Greenview High School. Kansas State and Colorado are in the mix here, but just like for Pollard, we seem to have the edge in this battle. He just visited the campus back in week 3 with Sean Pollard, and we seem to be in really good position to potentially land him. Nicknamed the Chosen One, the question is, will Kerry be the chosen one for the Kansas football program? And I certainly think there's a chance the answer is yes. Because again, even though he is ranked a little bit lower than both Rambo and Pollard, I think he's just as good. He's got the arm talent, he's got the accuracy, he's got the intangibles, and he, like Sean Pollard, is a gem. There really isn't much separating Pollard and Chosen for me, and in the likelihood that both of these guys end up committing to the program, it's going to be a really interesting dilemma that we face with the two of them, along with the other quarterbacks that we have on the roster. But nonetheless, I think both of these prospects are extraordinarily talented. And again, a big reason why we're not really that much heavily pursuing Enrique Rambo. That'll bring us to the running back position. I like the running back room that we have currently, but there's nobody on our team who can become the next Devin Neal per se. I think we're going to be a running back by committee for a while. Johnny Thompson had a big offseason, and he's played well so far. Jazir Tolbert has shown some flashes. Maybe Stewart or McKeithen can play a long-term role. But I do like the 3 guys we have on the board currently, and I think all 3 of these guys have a chance to, at the very least, be good in a running back by committee situation. And that starts with Reed Sharp from St. Louis, Missouri, and Cardinal Ritter High School, the alma mater of Jamison Williams. I already know if we end up getting this kid, I'm going to call him Reed Shepard way too many times, and it's going to be so frustrating. But Sharp is a fascinating player, 5'10", around 190 pounds, so he's a little bit undersized, but he is pretty physical for being a smaller back. Teams seem to be wary of his size, though. It's only a 2-horse race between us and Minnesota, and right now it seems pretty even. But again, the interesting thing that I notice is that the super highly ranked prospect really doesn't appear to be that much worse than guys ranked significantly lower, and that includes Cornell Teamer from Miami, Florida, and Booker T. Washington High School. Now, you may remember the quarterback we went over, Sean Pollard, is also from Booker T. Washington. These two are not teammates or anything. They just happen to go to 2 different high schools with the same exact name. But nonetheless, I really like Cornell Teamer. 5'10", 190, pretty similar in terms of size to Sharp. I think he's a little bit more athletic, has a little more juice to him, but maybe isn't the physical early down runner that Reed Sharp is. And then we look at Ty Lord from Houston, Texas, and Strake Jesuit High School. I don't think Lord necessarily has the top-end speed that either Sharp or Teamer does, but he's a patient runner. He can get from 0 to 100 really quickly, and he's a major asset in the passing game. I think this is somebody who could be a really nice receiving back on 3rd downs for us down the line. 5'10", around 185 pounds. So these 3 running backs are essentially identical in terms of size and athletic profile. But I think they all have unique differences. I think Sharp is the most physical runner of the group. I think Teamer's the big play threat. And Lord is the most dependable in the passing game. As we move to wide receiver, this is a position we've really focused on recruiting. That started last year in the transfer portal, getting Manjack and Rubin. But both of those guys are seniors. Do we have any long-term starters on the roster? I think there's a chance the answer is yes. Mario Maddox, I like him, the JUCO prospect. Sheldon Brink and Dorian Pepper. Those 3 guys are probably going to play 4 games each this year, and they'll all be redshirted. And then Emmanuel Ross as well, the transfer from Syracuse. There's some upside with that group. But receiver's still a need, and I don't think there's a clear alpha wide receiver on our roster currently, but I think some of these guys on the recruiting board are going to be future NFL prospects. There are some studs here, including Colby Ellington from West Hills, California, and Jefferson High School, the alma mater of NFL wide receiver Romeo Doubs. So Ellington is the 64th ranked player in the class, and I really want him. He looks awesome. 6'1", 218, 94 speed rating, really athletic. He's a good route runner, good hands. He can play in the slot. He can play in the outside. And you'll notice the common theme with the receivers we're going after is that all these guys are big and all these guys can run. Now, the problem with Ellington is that he no longer fits our playing style deal breaker because, well, we don't have the passing offense that we did last year. I'm going to keep him on the board to try to see if that grade goes up. But if it doesn't, I am confident in the other guys we have here, and it'll be okay that we potentially lose out on Ellington. That starts with Clyde Casey from Baldwin, Missouri, and Parkway West High School, the same school that former Missouri Tiger Blaine Gabbert went to. And again, with Clyde Casey, fringe top 200 player in the class, he's big, 6'2", 213, and he can run, 96 speed. I think of the 5 receivers here, he's probably the least polished, but there's definitely some upside with him. And then we get to these 3, Law, Lawton, and Jones. None of them expressed initial interest coming into the year, but I like their skill sets, scouted them. 2 of them are gems, and we have now firmly put ourselves in the battle for all 3. And that starts with Amani Law, who I really like. Cedar Hill, Texas. He goes to Duncanville, which is a sports powerhouse. In terms of football, they have former 5-star Colin Simmons, who's now at Texas. Cornerback, Viliami Manupuna, who was on our recruiting class last year. So I'm hoping Manupuna's in his ear to try to get Amani Law to come here. 6'2", nearly 220 pounds. He can run with the best of them, puts the top off of the defense, as you saw on that play. But he's a really good separator. He's got really solid hands. If he improves as a route runner, this is somebody who could be a first-round pick in the NFL. And I don't say that lightly. I think he's a terrific prospect. We're going to put a lot of points into him because I think LSU is going to get in on this battle once the school list is narrowed down to 5. I think it would be pretty cool to get Josh Lawton as well, because maybe we could have Law and Lawton in the receiving corps. Now, Tennessee is starting to make a big push on him, so I'm worried we're not going to land him, which is unfortunate because he might be the freakiest receiver of this group, and that says something. 6'4", 212 pounds, 94 speed. He as well is a great separator. He's got probably better hands than Amani Law. He as well just needs to improve a little bit as a route runner, and if he does, I think this is another guy who has the upside to be a first-round caliber receiver in 3 to 4 years from now. This is a very competitive battle. Kentucky's in the mix, Memphis is in the mix, and as I mentioned, Tennessee's going to be going all out on him, so we're going to have to give him a bunch of points over the next couple of weeks if we want any chance to land him. And then there's Rajon Jones from Washington, D.C., He plays for Sidwell Friends Academy, a school that's produced a lot of notable names, but not in the football sphere. In the NBA, Sadiq Bey and Josh Hart. A lot of children of famous politicians, and most importantly, Bill Nye the Science Guy. Well, I'm no scientist, but after doing some experimenting, looking at these receiver skill sets, I think of the 5 players here, Rajon Jones is the most likely to make the earliest impact. I think he's the best route runner of the group. Good hands, good separator. He is athletic, but he doesn't quite have the size or speed that the other guys have here, so that maybe limits his ceiling a little bit. But I think he's really good. I think it's going to be a 3-horse race with us, Virginia Tech, and UNC. Having good wide receivers is going to be paramount. We saw the role that Luke Grimm and Lawrence Arnold played last year, but it's also important to have a good tight end. We saw what Jarrett Casey did for us in the playoffs. I think we've got our long-term starting tight end on the roster already with Isaiah Lamore. He's shown some flashes over the first 2 games of the year, but we do have a really good player here with Rico Ruggins. He's the 60th ranked player in the nation and the #1 tight end in this high school recruiting class from Knoxville, Tennessee, and Knoxville Catholic, the alma mater of potential future Hall of Fame defensive back Harrison Smith, along with Amari Rogers. Even though tight end isn't some huge need, and this is a really competitive battle with a lot of schools in the mix, I want Rico Ruggins because I think he's a really good player. There's a reason why he's the #1 tight end in this year's high school class, and somebody who very well could challenge Isaiah Lamore to be the long-term starter at the position. Really athletic, good hands, not a great blocker yet, but I like what he provides a lot as a receiver. But again, there are 7 teams in the mix. As we move over to the offensive line, never hurts to add more to the O-line, considering the unit's been a little underwhelming this year, and we have 4 seniors starting. James Livingston obviously had a huge offseason, and while I don't think he's played all that well so far, I still really like him for the future. But he's the only non-senior currently starting on the offensive line. We're going to have to replace 4 of these guys next year, and many of the replacements I think might be on the roster already. But this is a really good offensive line high school class with a few prospects I'm really high on, including Reggie Chanel. It's us in Kansas State in the mix. That's it. So he's either going to come here or to our number 1 rival. Chanel has been playing in Sergeant Bluff, Iowa over the last 3 years before transferring to football powerhouse IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, where he has played left tackle for the Ascenders after developing at right tackle throughout most of his high school career. I like having guys that can play at both spots, and Chanel certainly can do that. This is somebody who wins with power. 6'5", nearly 330 pounds, big, physical player with a nice anchor in the run game. If he can be a little more consistent in pass protection, again, I think we're looking at a future NFL player. And then Jalen Casey from St. Louis, Missouri, Cardinal Ritter High School, teammates with the 4-star running back, Reed Sharp, who we went over earlier. A big reason why Sharp has been effective this year, especially running to the left side, is that he is a 4-star left tackle on his team with Casey, and there's a lot of teams interested in him. He's another guy who has experience at left tackle and right tackle. Look at him just annihilating the defensive end on that play. I think he's a little bit better in pass protection, though, and I think this is somebody who could be a blindside left tackle for a quarterback. Missouri has the edge on him, but we're right in the mix, currently in 2nd place. And then we get to Kenyon DeBow. We just added him on the board. We're currently in 9th place. Again, if we can make it into the top 8 and cement ourselves in this battle, I think we have a real chance of landing him. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State have both given him scholarships, but if we put a lot of points into him, I think we can land him. And he would be a really good consolation prize if we lose out on one of these 2 tackles, or even if we get them, it would be nice to add him as well. I think Denbo is the most athletic of these 3 tackles from Tuttle, Oklahoma. Plays at Heritage High School, the same school that Wes Welker and Shirlene Shepard played at, so more of a receiver school, but Denbo looks to break the trend on the offensive line. And then as we move over to guard, again, 2 really, really good players. As I said, it's a loaded offensive line class, and I want to take advantage. Angelo Edmonds is in a really competitive battle with Auburn and Alabama. It's going to be a hard time landing him, but I think it's worth a try because I think he's one of the best players on the recruiting board. From Phoenix City, Alabama, plays at Central High School, the same school as former 5-star receiver Cam Coleman, who's now at Auburn, along with former NFL running back J.D. McKissick. This is somebody who, again, wins with power, great anchor in the run game. He feels like a really good heir apparent to the really good interior offensive lineman that Alabama already has, but we're going to try to convince him otherwise. And then we get to Taylor Council. Again, a lot of teams in the mix. Utah is the favorite right now, and we're only in 4th. But we're going to give it our best shot because he looks like a terrific player in his own right. From Stockton, California, and St. Mary's High School, the alma mater of former NFL running back Doug Martin. He's an athletic player who really moves quickly, and I think he's going to be able to match up with some of the more athletic defensive linemen in college football. And then as we move over to center, Benji Trahan from Cheyenne, Wyoming. This is a pretty slow-moving recruiting battle. I don't think we have to put a lot of points into him yet. It's a little bit of a surprise, though, because I do really like the player. Another really athletic lineman, and I like his versatility. He obviously has most of experience at center, but he's played at both guard spots as well. Comes in with not great size, 6'1", 293. He's a little bit undersized. That might be why he's being under-recruited, is that he's a little bit tiny. But otherwise, I think he's quite good. As we move over to the defensive side of the ball, defensive end is one of our strongest long-term positions because we have Trevion Ford for the next 2 years. Seth Jennings, I think, is the best prospect we got out of last year's recruiting class, and I think it's only a matter of time until he really figures it out. Dekias Brinkley was, of course, a freshman All-American last year, and I like some of the other young guys here. Graydon Grimes, remember when he won the Conference Player of the Week last year? Ben Biaria is being redshirted. I like his potential. Defensive tackle, though, is a bigger need. 4 of the 6 guys here are seniors, so it's definitely a position we need some talent, and that's why I'm going after more edge rushers some guys who can play inside and out. I specifically wanted versatile defensive ends, and that starts with Anthony Bartow, who is maybe the best defensive player we have on the board, if not certainly in the top 3. He's from New London, Texas, and plays at Allen High School, the same school that Kyler Murray was a powerhouse at. Bartow is 6'2", 280 pounds. He's really consistent and really good as a run defender. The question is, will he ever be an elite pass rusher? And I think with his size, length, and athleticism, the answer is yes. It's going to be a tough battle, though. Texas A&M really likes him. Texas is in the mix as well, so I don't think it's likely that we land him, but I want to keep him on the board because I think he's really good. Kerry Folk is next up. It's a 2-horse race with Uz and BYU. Another slower moving battle, but a guy who I do like quite a bit. He's a fringe top 200 player in the class, 6'4", 293. Perfect example of somebody who's versatile and will have the size and strength to play inside. Plays for Pleasant Grove High School. For those of you who were here for the Westlake series, that's a blast from the past. And then we get to Devin Murphy from Des Moines, Iowa. Plays for Downing Catholic. I couldn't find any football players who went to the school, but Caitlin Clark is an alum. Devin Murphy is a fringe top 150 player in the class and the 9th ranked right end. He's listed as a bust, but I do like him. Somebody who really wins with power. He is big, physical, and strong. The question with him, though, is will he be able to match up with quicker and more athletic offensive linemen, where he won't always be able to rely on his strength. But I think if he becomes a little bit more consistent and well-rounded as a pass rusher, he could be really good. As we move over to defensive tackle, one of the bigger needs on the roster, J.P. Vernon is in the midst of a heavily exciting recruiting battle. There's 5 teams in the mix, including us. Vernon's undersized, 6'1", 285, but he's really athletic. This is somebody who has great get-off, gets off the line immediately, isn't necessarily the strongest and doesn't have a great anchor in the run game, but I think right now he's a really good rotational pass rusher who has the upside to maybe become more than that. Paris Emery is a 3-star, one of the lower-ranked prospects on the board, but with defensive tackle being a huge position of need, I'm more willing to go after lower-ranked players. He's a fringe top 600 player in the class, and it's a 2-horse race between us and Western Michigan. This is somebody who, again, wins with power. He's definitely not the athlete that J.P. Vernon is, though. I think that's the big difference between the two of them. The upside is a lot higher with Vernon, but I think the two of them will have a similar impact early on in their collegiate careers. And then Jeremiah Ort. There's not a lot of interest in him. We're the only scholarship at the moment, trying to put ourselves in this battle. He's from Atlanta, Georgia, and he plays at Booker T. Washington High School. For those of you counting at home, that's the 3rd player on the recruiting board who plays for a high school named after Booker T. Washington. But again, none of them play for the same school. They're not teammates. The schools just happen to have the exact same name. I'm a little bit surprised that nobody's really that interested in Ort because I like the athleticism with him. I think he's got a pretty high ceiling, higher than Paris Emery. And I think down the line he could be a really good player. As we move over to outside linebacker, the first 2 guys here are more of traditional edge rushers, and then we'll go over off-ball linebackers. We have an older group currently at linebacker. I think Samuel Mpemba is definitely a piece of the future, but Jason Gilliam's a senior, J.B. Brown is a senior. I like what I've seen so far from Devontae Crispin through 2 games. I thought he played well in both. So Crispin and Mpemba are both long-term starters, but otherwise, do we have anybody else on the roster? Maybe Mo Nwokeji, maybe Zach Stokes. But I do like these 2 edge rushers who probably would move over to defensive line in our scheme. And that starts with J.J. Addington from American Fork, Utah, and Pleasant Grove High School. He's teammates with the defensive end we went over, Kerry Folk. So maybe we can get the 2 of these guys to come in as a package deal. Addington is the higher ranked of the 2 players from Pleasant Grove. He's a fringe top 60 player in the class. Impressive athlete, wins with power. He isn't a great cover player. He isn't a great run defender. So again, I think he's primarily going to play defensive end. I'd like to see him bulk up a little bit. Maybe add 15 or 20 pounds of weight. And hopefully he doesn't lose athleticism in the process. Sean Snead is the 9th ranked player in the entire country. He's a 5-star. He's the highest ranked prospect on the board. He's a bust, and I don't think he's going to live up to his top 10 ranking, but I do think he's really good. plays for St. Augustine High School in New Orleans. And if you remember last year, we went after a prospect from this school, Angel Logan, the edge rusher, who we missed out on. He went to LSU. But when we watched him, we were introduced to Sean Snead, and we came away really impressed. Now, his battle is moving kind of slowly, which is odd. He's a top 10 player in the country. But there's a lot of teams in the mix for him, including us. We're in first. And then as we look at some more off-ball linebackers, we'll start with Santiago Herrera, another player from St. Louis, Missouri. He plays for Chaminade Prep, the alma mater of Brady Cook, the former Missouri quarterback, along with NBA stars Bradley Beal and Jason Tatum. I like Herrera's skill set because he can do a little bit of everything. He can blitz, he's got athleticism, and can enter the backfield quickly. He's a good run defender as well. Want to see him improve in coverage, but part of the reason why he can kind of be hidden in coverage is because the Chaminade linebacking core has a really good cover linebacker. That player is Peyton Theory. So yes, these two linebackers play in the same linebacking room, which is pretty scary to think about. Now, Theory's a little bit inconsistent in zone. I think he's better in man right now. Good run defender as well. That's the stronger point of his game. But I do like how he matches up with tight ends and slot receivers because I think he's got the athleticism to handle it. Let's move over to the cornerback position and the secondary. This is definitely an area we need to improve upon for the long term. We've got some intriguing talent in the corner room, but I don't know if any of these guys are long-term starters. We're banking on one of Mills, Todd, Millerton, Manupuna, Ayers, or Chinasa to really take a big leap within the next year or two. And maybe that does happen, but I'm not sure. At safety as well, we've got two seniors starting with Devin Dye and Javon McIntyre, and I'm not sure our long-term starters at the position are on the roster. Of course, Damani Maxon is a terrific player, but he's more of a box linebacker. I don't really want to move him back to safety because he's so good in his current role. So safety is one of the biggest needs on this entire team, and I think corner is as well, which is why we've put a lot of emphasis on the secondary, and that starts with 5-star Quantavious Landers, the number 1 prospect in the state of Kansas. He's the only prospect ranked in the top 593 within the state. Only 4 prospects from Kansas are in the top 1,000. And other than Landers, there's really no intriguing players here. It's kind of the opposite of last year, where there were a lot of pretty good prospects from the state, but nobody who was really good. I think that's a big reason why we did so well recruiting within the state of Kansas. But this year, Landers is the only Kansas-born player on the board, because there just aren't that many good ones. Landers isn't even playing his high school ball in Kansas this year. He's transferred to St. John's Bosco in California, the alma mater of Josh Rosen, Trent McDuffie, and both of the Uyunglele brothers. Now, as we look at his skill set, 6'1", 200 pounds, really solid athlete, sticky in man coverage, and he can play zone as well. There's a reason why he's a 5-star prospect and one of the most sought-after corners in this class, but like some of the other 5-stars on the board, it's a pretty slow-moving recruiting process. And again, I'm not really sure why teams are not heavily going after these 5-stars. Joey Feliciano from Cypress, Texas is in the midst of a competitive 5-way recruiting battle with multiple teams from the state of Texas, including SMU and Texas Tech, but we are right in the mix. Will this be the second consecutive season that we get a white corner to commit to the program? He plays for Cypress Creek High School, 6'1", 175, more of a traditional slot corner. He's not the most dynamic cover player, decent in man, not great in zone. So if he does come here, I think he would have a chance to be the long-term slot corner, somebody who's active in run defense, flies around the field, good overall instincts, and somebody who we want to play closer to the line of scrimmage. Teron Jean-Pierre is next up from Berea, Kentucky. There weren't a lot of teams going after him, and we were first introduced to him when we were watching Quantavious Landers at St. John Bosco. Jean-Pierre also plays at St. John Bosco, and he lines up on the other side. A deadly corner duo with 2 top 300 prospects in the nation, lining up opposite of each other on the outside. That's pretty scary to think about for opposing offenses and wide receivers. 6'3", 195. I'm really impressed with the athletic profile, the height, weight, speed. I think he's a little bit raw in terms of his cover ability, certainly not at the level that Landers is now. But given the athletic profile, it's hard not to believe in the upside. 2-horse race between us and Louisville. And then Alfonso Rugamba. Nobody's really going after him yet, but I do like him. From Hollywood, Florida, and Frederick Douglass High School. Another guy who might be more of a slot corner because he isn't some great cover player, but he's got good ball skills, active around the football, good in run defense, somebody who you want on the field defensively. You just don't really know where you're going to put him, but you got to find a way to make it work because he's too good to keep off the field. And then as we get to the safety position, another guy in Bryce Huntley, who we're in danger of losing out on because of his deal breaker of playing style. Our defense has not gotten enough interceptions. We only have one through the last 2 weeks. And while the secondary doesn't have the horsepower that it did last year without Kobe Bryant, Mello Dotson, and Marvin Grant, I still expect us to get more than an interception every 2 weeks. So I think there's a chance that we'll be able to get that grade where it needs to be. And I really hope we do because I really want Bryce Huntley. As I mentioned, safety's a big position of need. And I think Bryce Huntley's a guy who could start next year as a true freshman, as a center field type of free safety who can roam a lot of space. He plays for Archbishop Ryan High School in Philadelphia. This is somebody who I think has good size, good athleticism, and again, I think he's really polished right away and would have a good chance to play for us as soon as next year, replacing the role that Devin Dye has taken over the last 2 years. If we miss out on him, though, which given the deal breaker is kind of likely, Marcus Ashe looks like a good replacement. Ashe is a fringe top 350 prospect in the nation from Parker, Colorado, and Legend High School, the alma mater of NBA champion Derek White. Ashe is not a traditional center field free safety, though. This is somebody who lines up around the field, undersized, 5'11", 217, but he's active in run support, good ball skills. I just don't really know where we would play him. Maybe the Damani Maxon role long term. I get that Maxon is only a true sophomore, but doesn't hurt to think for the future. And then at strong safety, J.P. Hussein, a fringe top 1,000 prospect. We just put him on the board. There isn't really much interest in him, but I do like the skill set. Even though he's listed as a strong safety, I think he would slide over to free safety for us. He looks more like a traditional cover player who can take up space, roam the back end. Isn't necessarily somebody who's some great run defender and will be around the line of scrimmage constantly, but I like what he provides as a cover player. And I think he's being heavily under-recruited. When we scouted him, I liked what we saw. I think he's definitely one of the best 1,000 players in this senior class, and somebody who I think could be a real diamond in the rough. And if teams don't go after him soon, we're going to be able to land him hopefully pretty quickly. And I think he could end up being one of the better players that we land in this year's recruiting class, even though he's currently the lowest ranked player on the entire board. So there you go. Those are the 35 prospects who we currently have listed here. Before we wrap things up, though, I do want to go over how we're going to use our points for this next week. We've got a lot of guys ready for visits, but as we've talked about throughout the year, we don't play at home again until week 7, so it's not really worth using points on having these guys visit now. So I think how we're going to organize it, right now I have it by position, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to organize it based on the players who, as you can see, are down to 5 schools. Then we've got the guys down to 8, and then we've got the guys whose recruitments are open. I want to do this because I really want to put a lot of points into the guys who are down to 5 schools. I think this is the most important part of recruiting when you're between 5 and 3 schools, because this is your chance to be able to take the lead and put yourselves in position to close the deal when you're down to 3 schools. We're now going to be able to hard sell on Pollard, Chosen, and Sharp. There are other players who we know their 3 motivations, but you can only sell when you're down to 5 schools. So those are the only 3 prospects we can do it for. As I mentioned, Josh Lawton, I want to go all in on him because I think Tennessee is going to give us a run for their money. The defensive end, Anthony Bartow as well. We're going to give him a lot of points because I know Texas A&M really likes him. And then as we look at the guys down to 8 schools, not as much points because, again, I want to be strategic on how we are allocating our 700 recruiting hours. Hopefully we land some of these guys as commitments pretty soon. Probably won't happen next week, but I think within the next 2 to 3 weeks, the 2 quarterbacks, Chosen and Pollard, are probably the 2 guys I would watch out for first, along with linebacker Santiago Herrera. So next episode will be our first doubleheader of this series. As I said, I want to do 2 games per episode, and we've got 2 tough ones. Death Valley, number 5 Clemson, led by possible first-round quarterback Cade Klubnik. And then we stay on the road to face off against another really good quarterback, Noah Fifita, and the University of Arizona to kick off Big 12 play. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Let me know what you thought of the style of video down below, what you liked and what you didn't like, and would like to see me do in next year's recruiting special, assuming I do something like this again for Season 3. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out. Rock Chalk.